everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Nathan. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager here at the American Australian Association. We're really delighted to welcome you to part 2 of our immigration series. This series is designed to provide trusted, practical insights for Australians navigating the US immigration system. I do want to start off by saying that the information provided in this seminar and the slides are for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. You should not act or refrain from acting on the basis of any content included here without first seeking legal advice from an attorney. Speaking of attorneys, tonight we're fortunate to be joined by brilliant Chantal Commissa-Markel. She's the principal attorney at Commissa-Markel, a New York-based immigration law firm with extensive experience advising Australians and other global professionals, and actually who helped me get my E3 around this time last year. So welcome, Chantal, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Nate. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be able to share my knowledge and hopefully make people feel a bit more comfortable. I know it's a scary environment right now with a lot of the media. I'm going to take a moment to just quickly share my screen and just let me know do you see my screen there?
Yeah. Yep.
Fabulous. And let me just see if I can. Oh yeah, there we go. That's a bit about us. Just wanted to confirm that what we're gonna cover tonight is for people that are mostly here in the US legally, not illegally. So our firm doesn't do deportation or asylum cases, or our predominant area of business immigration is business immigration and or family immigration, but mostly for people that are here legally. So these updates will pertain to people who are here on visas, green cards, or coming and going on ESTA. And if you're not coming and going on ESTA and you have a visa or a green card, you might have family members that are coming and going on ESTA that this information is relevant for as well. Okay. Yes. So actually, I think I jumped ahead of you.
Jumped ahead. I was about to say, what are we going to be covering today? Like, what brings us here?
This is so fantastic. So we are in part 2. So I wanted to quickly talk about what we did cover last time, because if you're joining for the first time tonight, you didn't get to make it last time, you can request a recording from last time, just because we did go into some things very much in depth that you might find valuable. So last time we did talk about denials, and we're going to talk about denial of entry again this time, but we're going to approach it differently. Last time we spoke about red flags, what can cause denials of entry, tips, what to say. I know someone on this time around did ask, what should I say, not say when entering the United States? So we did talk about that in depth last time. There were slides available for that too. What were the consequences if you're denied entry on ESTA? If you're denied entry on ESTA or any visa, actually, you can never use ESTA again. So that's an important thing, and we covered that. We talked a couple of quick updates with respect to H-1B visas and O-1s. So if you're an H-1B or an O-1 person, you might want to go back to that previous presentation last time. We talked about the DS-160s in detail as well. And green cards, we talked about just the green card process and the backlogs and timing of green cards, marriage-based green cards and employment-based green cards, because we are seeing some backlogs there, and the reintroduction of interviews for those. So we covered that. We talked about citizenship, and we're not going to cover citizenship tonight. So we talked about there was a lot of fear around people that are here on green cards and were afraid to apply for citizenship, or asking, should I apply for citizenship? So if that's one of your questions, we did cover that in good depth and detail last time. So request the recording. Registration, there's this government registration requirement that Trump is now enforcing. The most relevant group of people that's relevant for is anyone who has a child that's here, has a child that's about to turn 14, isn't 14 yet, about to turn 14. And if you're not going to travel internationally within 30 days of that child's 14th birthday, it's worth going to that last webinar. Otherwise, if you're here legally, pretty much the registration requirement will not apply to you. Just if you're curious about the registration requirement, definitely we went over it in a lot of detail in the last webinar. Okay, so what are we covering today? We did last webinar talk about F, M, and J visas in respect of there was a pause on the visa interviews for F, M and J. These are predominantly student, the Fs are student visas, so are Ms, it's the type of student. Js are used for international student exchange, but also other categories for the Js, which is there's trainees, there's interns, there's student work travel, there's camp counselors, there's researchers, there's physicians. So there is a lot of people that are applying for a J visa that were affected. So we're going to talk about that and the resumption of those visa interviews. We're going to talk about social media vetting because that was one of the reasons why that there was a pause on those visa interviews. We're going to, again, look at this denial of entry because it just seems to be the hot topic, Nate, of what most people are concerned about, right?
At the moment.
Can I travel? Should I travel? Should I not travel? I'm hearing things of like, I'm part of the LGBTQ community and I'm too scared to travel. And, just really dissecting it. And I thought a great way to approach it. And last time we went through the content of it. So think if you are scared to travel, it's good to go back to the last webinar. This time, what we're going to do is look at some social media posts of what you're seeing out there and dissecting that and going, what's true in this and what's not? And what from looking at it, when I see these posts from an immigration lawyer's point of view, I go, aha, of course, right? He was denied entry because this and this. But if you're not an immigration lawyer, you're just going, oh my God, he was denied, he didn't even.
There's so much misinformation out there too.
Exactly. So what's true, what's not? Traveling on a green card. So there are some posts out there and we're going to go through this, but a client of mine, Stephanie, I think you're on tonight. We're going to do a whole section around something you sent to me just about people traveling on green cards. People on green cards are scared to travel. Mostly you should not be afraid to travel on a green card. There's travel bans that Trump has recently, since the last webinar, instituted. We'll touch on that. The DS-160s again, and a short update and some questions on the E3 visas that we can cover.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack today. But I do know the student visas are a big topic at the moment. And we started talking about it last time. So last we heard these were paused in late May. Is there any updates on those now? How are things looking?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Thursday of last week, the Department of State, and that's the government entity that controls visa appointments at consulates abroad, they did announce that they will resume scheduling F, M, and J visa appointments. So between the last webinar and now, so the last webinar, they'd announced that they were pausing the ability to book a visa appointment. They said that anyone who had a visa appointment would still be able to attend it. But if you didn't have an appointment for your F, M, or J, you couldn't book an appointment. So now they're saying we're going to open it up again for people to be able to book to get their student visa to be able to come to the US. So I also said in the last webinar that I would give an update. We had, I think our webinar was on a Monday or Tuesday again, and we had someone going on the Friday for their F1 visa appointment after that pause had been announced. So their visa interview was honored. They're going to Harvard actually for a 2-week course in July. And what happened there was they said, yes, we'll process your visa, but they noticed that this person's social media accounts were set to private. So they gave her a notice and said, we want you to open your social media accounts to public so that we can check them and then we'll issue a visa. So I think something that's important to note there is that that's in line with the whole reason that they paused the visa appointments is because they wanted to implement policies with respect to how consular officers should go about vetting these students' social media and their backgrounds. So in the cable where the Department of State said, yes, we're going to resume. And the reason I think this is important for people to listen, even if you're not an F1 student, or even if you're not a student applying for an F or M or a J, we are seeing that they are applying this across the board to all visas. So yeah, sure, they've made the announcement for the Fs because students typically have been the category of visa applicants that are a little bit more, active and politically active and vociferous. And so they've targeted that, and there's been this whole target around Columbia and Harvard students that are protesters and so forth. So they've announced it for that, but we're seeing in the rollout, we're seeing that they're applying these same principles across all visa categories. So this is important for everyone to listen to if you're applying for a visa, E3, O1, H1, any class. So they've been instructed to review applicants' online presence for any indications of hostility towards the citizens, and this is quoting it, for the citizens, culture, government, institutions, or founding principles of the United States, and to flag any advocacy for, aid, or support for foreign terrorists and other threats to US national security, and as well as support for unlawful anti-Semitic harassment or violence. So if you have anything in your social media that is anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, you know, this could be problematic. They add that officers should watch for applicants who demonstrate a history of political activism. Consider whether that activity is likely to continue in the United States. So they're looking through your social media. Are you someone that likes to protest, that's going to continue to do that? Organized protests. So you're going to continue to do that. That can be problematic. And if you go to your interview, they're going to question you about it. And we've had applicants that have applied for E3s even that have been questioned about their views on Hamas, on Gaza, on Israel. These are questions that are coming up in every interview, not just F1 interviews. It also says that now, and we predicted this in our last webinar because we've been around the block here at Commiss Markel over the last 25 years of doing this, that they will prioritize J1 applicants. I think they'll also prioritize Fs so that students can come here in time for their studies, but they've said that the first group that they're going to prioritize are physicians. Remember, I said J's are also used for physicians, so they want to prioritize physicians. And students that are coming to US universities that have, where their foreign international students constitute 15% or less of the student population. So if you look at this again, you know, we talked about this last week, that Harvard and Columbia, they have about over 40% of their student body are foreign international students. So again, they're prioritizing, you know, these smaller universities, the ones that, you know, that are less likely to have had students that were politically, you know, political activists and protesters and so forth. So they're like, let's get these easier ones out the way, and then we'll concentrate on the hard ones.
It's only prioritizing. It's not, you know, eliminating certain universities or so to speak.
Correct. So well, there we go. You know, we've had since then, we've had 2 Harvard students that have applied for their F, no problems whatsoever. They got their visas. They're now entered the US. There's not a problem. So you shouldn't think that if you're applying for your visa at Harvard or Columbia or one of these universities that you won't get it. And we actually haven't seen a slowdown either. So it'll be interesting to see if how they play out this prioritizing. What I do think is important, though, is if you're applying for any other kind of visa at the moment, book your appointment now, because the student visas are going to flood the consulates, the FM and Js that have been paused. That's going to flood the consulates and their availability. So if you have to renew your visa in July, August, book your appointment now, because it's going to be less availability for these other visa classes, because they're going to be needing to process Fs and Js and Ms, because courses start in August for school. So
we a whole new wave of new visas applying.
Exactly.
So as people are now like booking into their appointments, is there anything, you know, around the social media that they really should know?
Yeah. So again, you know, if you're applying for a visa, especially if we haven't seen this request to open up private accounts on E3s, visa appointments, because we have had clients that have gone to their E3 visa appointments recently who have had their Instagram and social media set to private. They were not held up. They were not asked to open up their social media accounts so far. But we have seen with the student visas that they have been asked to open up their social media accounts. So I think if you're applying for a student visa, I would, especially if you've nothing to hide, you're very clean, your posts are benign, it's you and your friends, you know,
avocado and toast, you know.
Yeah, sunsets, avocado and toast, you know, open it up, because it could potentially mean your visa processing goes smoother and faster without the potential delay of if they do want you to open it up. this girl's visa, for example, got delayed by an extra 10 days because she had to go
Yeah.
away, open it up, tell them that it had opened up. Now they had to go and reconcentrate on it again, and then they had to process the visa. So it will, you know,
Avoid the backwards and forwards.
exactly. So the other thing is, be mindful of what you post. And, people are like, oh, I've posted stuff that's, pro LGBTQ, or I am part of the LGBTQI community. Is this going to be a problem with my visa? And am I not going to get my visa? This is not true, right? They are not allowed to discriminate against you based on your sex or sexual orientation, your race, these sorts of things. So, but where it becomes a problem is if your post that supports these LGBTQ or Israel, Palestine, or, has a comment in it that could be construed as anti this administration. So I'll give it an example. I have a client and friend who went to a Dua Lipa concert, and she did a whole post about it, about this is so great for Gay Pride Month. Dua Lipa is such an advocate for gay pride, and we were so supportive of this, and it's so amazing, and we need to fight for justice. So I was like, okay. I called her and I said, hey, everything about your post is fine. You're allowed to support the LGBTQI community 100%. But the bit about let's fight for justice could be construed as against the current administration. So just take out those words, right?
Yeah, would you just edit it? Just edit it? Like, would you delete it or?
No, just edit it. You don't have to delete it. Just edit those couple of words, right? And you don't want to do the other thing, which I did talk about in the last webinar quite extensively. You also don't want mass deletions, right? So because
doing that a lot, people are deleting posts, yeah.
Yeah, so just be conscious of what you post. I think that's really important. Actually, I thought this was really interesting. So my kids go to a school, and the principal, they just finished up school, and a principal posted in the final email this quote, and I read it, and I'm like, this is so relevant to our webinar and what we're currently going through, even in immigration law. And she said, because one of the school's core values is speak courageously. And she wanted to point out that sometimes speaking courageously isn't necessarily reacting to the first thing you see and posting immediately in this society of, you have to react so fast to a post that you see and comment on it. And, these are also the things that can get people into trouble, right? You're like commenting on, you see a post about, Hamas or Palestine, Israel, the LGBT community, and you're like, yes, this administration is, really, horrible, just be careful of what you post. And I thought this quote was really important and just timely, which is this Danish philosopher, existential philosopher, who said, Søren Kierkegaard, who said, people demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. And I think what's important here is that if you are not an American citizen, you don't even have the right of freedom of speech. We have so many clients that are like, well, I'm exercising my freedom of speech. Like, hello, this is not a right that you have in the United States. So be cautious, think. No one can take away your thoughts, right? But if you speak out, and especially publicly, someone can take away your right to enter the United States or your right to get a visa. So just be smart, right? It's just avoiding deep thinking. We are nudged instead, just it should be cherished. This deep thought should be cherished.
I think people are doing that a lot. I think people are posting very quickly, not thinking about it, but it's good to know that we can edit, and maybe that comment about don't mass delete everything is very important. What about, like, I know friends who have deactivated social media accounts. We've actually got Michelle, who's said that they've deactivated their Instagram or Facebook, but they have their LinkedIn. Does the immigration look at the fact you don't have any social media, or is like just a LinkedIn profile enough? Is that a red flag too?
So I think what's important is, look, if you don't want to deactivate it, if you do a Google search of your name and put LinkedIn in there, or your name and Instagram, and it looks like you used to have an account and then you deleted it like 2 weeks before your visa appointment or entering the United States, that's immediately going to raise a red flag. They're going to go, why did this person delete? They have something to hide. We're going to take them into secondary inspection if it's someone coming in. we're going to grill them now in their interview because why did they delete that? Open it up. What did you delete? Right. So I think, and if you're concerned, if you're worried, speak to an immigration lawyer because, you know, you can be pro certain things that might be fine. So just speak to an immigration lawyer and say, these are the posts I'm concerned about. What do you think maybe I should do about this?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Before rushing to
think-
doing things.
I think most of the people in our audience probably aren't posting too crazy. But I know there actually has been some Australians in the news recently. So we recently saw an Australian being denied at the border for what was on his phone, what was on his social media. Can you dissect that story for us and understand what happened there?
Yeah, so I think this is a good one to dissect because it's recent and it's like, what happened here, right? So the Australian writer says he was refused entry to the United States after being interrogated about his views on the Israel-Gaza war and articles that he'd penned in university protests, right? So 33-year-old traveling to the US gets detained for 12 hours. Number one, people go, oh my God, he was detained for 12 hours. Okay, let's just think about this. So he was taken into secondary inspection and it would have taken about 4 hours for them to even like question him and figure out that they were going to send him back. And the amount of time you're detained is not based on what did you do, what did you say, you say something worse, you detain longer, anything like that. It's based on the carrier you arrived on and when after they've determined that they're sending you back, when is the next flight on that same carrier that they can send you back on? So if you come with a carrier that doesn't have many flights back to Australia, then you're going to be detained longer. So 12 hours in this instance is actually not that long. He didn't have to spend overnight in the United States. So anyway, he gets put back on the plane and his phone was seized and they say, you know why you're here. You're here because of your political activism, basically. He was a student at Columbia University. And so the government has lists of students that were at Columbia, at Harvard. When you book a flight, your name is checked before you get off that flight as to whether there's anything iffy about you, and it's flagged in the system before you come through immigration. So this is how, another thing that can happen is, you hear about people that are getting arrested at airports because those people that have arrest warrants, that's flagged immediately. So there's police waiting for them. This isn't that situation. But anyway, they knew that they were going to question him. So they questioned him about everything that he'd written. So about 45 minutes, they detain him, they interrogate him about his views. He's asked what he thinks about Palestine, what he thinks about Israel, does he have any Jewish friends? And this is in line, right, with the student visas. And we go back to what consular officials at the consulates have been asked to concentrate on. Government, the immigration, CBP, Customs Border Protection, which is when you come into the United States, are applying the same thing, right? They're doing applicants, they're looking for applicants who have demonstrated history of political activism and whether that activity is likely to continue in the US once they enter the US. So that's what they're questioning about. They're like, is this guy going to start up protests again? Could he create political unrest? Is he a threat to the national security because of this, right? So they go on and they take his phone. But you know what happens? They see that he's actually used drugs before. So now, where they had a subjective area, they were questioning him, they were looking for something on his phone, evidence, something that, evidence that he would create political unrest, that he would maybe create more protests. They didn't find that. So if that was it, maybe he would have been let in and it would have been actually fine. And we've had people that have been part of protests before, they have entered the United States because they don't have anything that shows that necessarily they're going to be problematic when they re-enter. But what they found was that he'd used drugs before. Now, this makes you immediately inadmissible. There's no subjectivity here anymore. The immigration officer can't let him in at this point at all because he's inadmissible. The law does not allow this immigration officer to exercise any discretion at all at this point, and he has to be denied entry. So that's the problem here. So they ask him about the drug use, and then what happens? He says, yes, I did. I used cannabis in New York because it's legal there. And it's like, oh my gosh, right? But he didn't realize what he was even doing or saying here. So I think what's really important for people to know is that cannabis is illegal federally. We did cover this in the last webinar, but here we go. Here's another instance where this happened again. He didn't listen to our webinar before he entered. Nathan, if he listened to it, he wouldn't be in this position right now. So you cannot say, oh yeah, I used, you know, I did it in a state that's legal. And in the last webinar, I talked about a client who was Spanish, who entered on an L. She had photos of going to a dispensary in Colorado, and they sent her back, right? So you can't even say you've done cannabis in Amsterdam. Like when I was, you know, I don't know, I was when I was 21, but you know, like years ago, if that's
when in Amsterdam, yep.
Yeah, and you've been there and it's illegal there. It doesn't matter. It's illegal federally to the United States if you've ever done it. And the key here is in immigration law, an admission to having done it is treated the same way as if you've been convicted of cannabis use and or possession. So now he's just admitted to it. He's got the equivalent of a conviction for possession of and use of cannabis. So he absolutely cannot be let into the country at this point. So they have to put him on. So what do they deny him on? They deny him on the fact that he's got the controlled substance charge now and equivalent of a conviction. But they also say to him, you lied. Also, you lied on your ESTA form because the ESTA form asks you if you have used drugs and you said no. And so let's look at the question. So they deny him for fraud and misrepresentation. But let's look at the question on the ESTA form. The question on the ESTA form says, have you ever violated any law related to possessing, using, or distributing illegal drugs? Okay. So have you violated any law? So he reads this when he applies for his ESTA and goes, no, right? No.
Yeah. No, I didn't do that.
Because when I did it, it was legal. So I didn't violate any law. He doesn't realize he violated a federal law, a United States federal law of using. That's that, right? Have you ever violated any law related to using illegal drugs, right? So yes, he has. So they say we're going to deny you on fraud and misrepresentation because you lied on that question. I would argue, yes, he was inadmissible based on the fact that he has this controlled substance charge and quote unquote conviction now because he admitted to it. But I would argue if I was his immigration attorney, when you try and get him back into the country, that he shouldn't have been denied on fraud and misrepresentation because fraud and misrepresentation requires you to knowingly lie. So he didn't knowingly lie. I don't know this guy, but I'm not sure. I have to be careful as a lawyer what I say. My guess is that if I asked him, when you filled out the ESTA, did you knowingly lie about that? My guess is he would say, no, I filled that out truthfully because I didn't think I violated a law. So what's really important, is that ignorance is no defense to the law. And I've got a slide about that. So even if he applied for a visa, right? So that's the ESTA questions. So what's important is probably some people are like, okay, well, that's not going to apply to me because, I'm not coming in on ESTA. But just be cautious because when you apply for a visa, there's a similar question, which is you'll see here, are you or have you ever been a drug user, abuser, or addict? If it was him, I would say no. Have you ever been arrested or convicted for any offense or crime, even though subject of a pardon, amnesty, or other similar action? So no, he's never been arrested or convicted.
He's never been convicted.
Now he's been convicted because he admitted to it. So that's problematic, right? Have you ever violated or engaged in a conspiracy to violate any law relating to a controlled substance? So here he probably would have answered no again because he thought he didn't violate it.
It was New York or it was in a state that was legal.
Right. And if they never found out from evidence on his phone that he actually had violated it, it would never have been a problem. But he had the evidence of this drug use on his phone. Yeah. So either don't use drugs. And if you do use drugs, just make sure you don't have any evidence.
Be cool about it. Be cool about it.
Yeah. The other thing, there's a question here about prostitution. And I think I thought that was a good one that people don't know about, because there have been stories of, and clients that have contacted us who they use facial recognition now also when you come in through the airport. So that we have clients who have been on OnlyFans site where the government has questioned when they've come in on either an ESTA or a visa, are they doing beyond what's on their OnlyFans, and could they be engaging in prostitution? And if you are engaging in prostitution, then you are inadmissible to the United States. So in Australia, so we had a very interesting case where in Australia, prostitution is legal, but pornography is not. In America, pornography is legal, prostitution is not. So if you're Australian, you might say, oh yeah, you might go with the Australian rules thinking that you haven't done anything wrong and screw yourself up, basically, right? So similar to this, it's one where people can get tripped up. I'm not, I'm not saying that we've got, people that engage in that in our viewership, but you never know, right? Or that procure that. So yeah, so just what's really important is ignorance is no defense to the law. So like him saying, he's like, well, I filled out the form the way everyone would. And so I don't understand why I was denied entry, because I don't think I, did anything wrong. That's true. He doesn't think he did anything wrong.
By the book, he's no.
You commit a crime, even if you didn't know it was a crime, doesn't mean that you're not, punished for it. So I think that's really important, just to know what the laws are if you're traveling into the United States.
Yeah. And maybe don't post about it or say no to it. But okay, so ignorance is no defense to the law. So is there anything else people should know about, like what else are they looking for in your phone that could make you admissible? Like he was made admissible because he had the post, and the other client had a photo of the dispensary. So what else could they find?
Yep. So and what makes them inadmissible, meaning like not able to be admitted to the United States. So what makes someone inadmissible? What are they looking for on your phone? The most common things, and we covered this in extensive detail in the last webinar, so I don't want to go into it too long now, especially for the people that have attended part one. And
we'll send the link. We'll send the link.
Yeah, we'll send the link. And there's a slide here that shows, these were examples of the slides that we had last time, the 3 most common ones, other things, if you've overstayed a visa, so forth, so forth. But what are they looking for on your phone? They're looking for evidence of immigrant, and we covered this in the last one too, but just to recap, they're looking for evidence of immigrant intent. Do you have relatives here? Do you have a significant other here and you're trying to come here and stay here long term? You don't have ties to Australia anymore or to your home country anymore, and now you're establishing ties here. That can be problematic if you're coming on an ESTA. Evidence of unauthorized work, they're looking for that. Like they're looking for texts that say, oh, yeah, you've got your shift at Old Mates. I mean, I'm not saying Old Mates hire anyone illegally, 100% not. But, like, you've got your shift somewhere. You don't want to have shifts anywhere. And by the way, if you haven't been to Old Mates, amazing place, go there. We love those boys. Evidence of substance abuse, right? They were looking for that. They found it on his phone. Evidence of political extremism. So that's what they were looking for. They didn't find that, but they found the drug abuse. So not drug abuse, but drug use. Sorry, not a drug abuser. But
they're looking under the same lens. They're going abuse. You're using it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh, I might have jumped ahead. This is a question I think you might have about.
Well, I know that one of the previous slides was talking about like DUIs and having committed crime, or like even something as simple as a DUI or road offense. It's like, but one of the most common ways. If you've done a crime like your DUI and you served your sentence, are you admissible? Was what I've had.
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? Yeah. And DUI, we covered that quite extensively in the last webinar. So if you have a DUI, absolutely 100% go to our last session, part 1, because we covered that. That can be very problematic, especially if you got a DUI after you last got your last visa. It's risky to travel for sure. You need to get a new visa. So yeah, if you have, and there was an example of this woman who was denied, she had a green card, she was traveling in, she got denied it, or she got detained because she had previously committed embezzlement. So yeah, this is a crime. And then she said, well, I've gone to jail for that. you know, or spent time in a halfway house, whatever it was, she saw it as, I committed, you know, I served out my sentence. I was punished already. So aren't I done with that? You know,
Yeah.
the thing is, even if you have done something where it was, even if it was expunged, right? You were arrested. Some of our Australian clients or clients just generally say, oh yeah, I was arrested for blah, 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 blah. But then it was dismissed and it's been expunged. So my criminal attorney told me I don't have to disclose that ever. The question is, have you ever been arrested? Charged, cited, blah, 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 right? So yes, you've been arrested. You have to disclose it still. It's worse sometimes with those things that get expunged, they're little and they're not something that will make you inadmissible. So it's better off disclosing it. And then they say, okay, great. This isn't something that, you know, makes you inadmissible to the United States. So this is fine. But if they think that you're hiding something and you don't disclose it, and then they charge you with fraud and misrepresentation, that's worse. Because then they think you're lying. Lying to the government is way worse than disclosing a crime or an arrest for something like public urination, open container, nuisance, a traffic. We had someone that said, oh, I just ran a red light, I ran a stop sign. These are things you should absolutely just say, disclose, because they're not things that make you inadmissible. They're not things that are going to make you not get your visa. So definitely, if you had any arrest whatsoever, talk to an immigration attorney to check whether, is this something big or not? Because sometimes it's not big, right?
Yeah, but like, I think that's the question, is like, okay, if you're unsure, it's generally just ask, and you want to make sure that you don't lie on the est and then get found out about lying. And then that's, well, exactly what happened to Alistair. So I guess
Wow.
going back to his case, you know, he was found lying, he was denied, he sent back to Australia. In the instance that he's like, well, I still want to move to the States, I still want to follow my career there, or whatever it is. I want to study in, you know, Colombia. What would you do to help him get back in? Because, you know, obviously that's a concern. Hopefully no one in this audience is having that problem, but it might happen.
Yeah.
It's possible, right?
Depending on why you were denied entry, you know, and we covered this in our last webinar too, just make sure you get the transcript so that the immigration lawyer can see why you were denied. But in his instance, let's just say, I would represent him and say, first of all, fraud and misrepresentation can make you inadmissible for a very long time, if not forever. So I would argue that there was no fraud and misrepresentation because he didn't intentionally lie. So he shouldn't have been denied on that ground. I would argue that first. Then I would argue that, yes, he is inadmissible because of his controlled substance charge. That's just on the face of it. It is what it is. But we're going to apply for a waiver of that inadmissibility for him and say, you know what, it was, and when you apply for a waiver, there are certain things you need to show. So you have to show the recency of the offence, the seriousness of the offence, has the person been rehabilitated? So we would develop a whole strong waiver case that shows, look, it was 5 years ago, it's the only charge he's ever had. You did it somewhere where he thought it was legal. He was just trying it, even like, no, he's never done it again. He's never had a police record associated with this ever. You know, we would get letters from people that know him. He's a great person. In fact, he does all this charity work. He does that. He does this, the church. But, you know, we would develop this strong case to say, you know what, he's not a threat to our country. You know, he's not someone that, yes, he did the wrong thing. He now knows that, but please, can you approve this waiver and let him in? And what does that mean? How long does that take? So that, if you need a waiver approved, currently it's taking about 8 months. So he would be stuck outside of the US for about 8 months. But hopefully, if he has a strong case that's been presented, it would get approved. Then he'd get issued either the tourist visa or E3 or F1 or whatever visa he's applying for, and then be able to re-enter the United States.
So it's not a forever closed door, which is great.
Yes.
I mean, even in the instance, if he comes back in 8 months, he's probably still coming out in under the current administration. So I know like that's a big kind of sentiment right now is Trump's administration and what's currently happening in Iran and Israel, and obviously the Colombia protests. And he was a Columbia student. Is this something that's like just because of Trump, or is it like because he's reintroduced this, or is it something that's, you know, we're seeing more now than before?
You will be completely surprised about the data. So because I think, look, I think there's two things that the media have caused. Number one, it's made think that there's more denials of entry under this administration than any other administration. But the other thing it's done has, I think, it has decreased the amount of tourism to the United States, right? Because people are scared to come to the United States now. They think they're not going to be able to get in, so they're just, picking another destination
Not bothering.
because they don't want to deal with that. So if we look at the data, there's significantly less tourists coming into the United States, but the number of denials proportionate to the less number of tourists is, the data shows that, and this was true under the last Trump administration as well. Each Trump administration has actually had fewer denials of entry than any other administration. So if you look here, there were actually more denials of entry under the Biden administration. And if we were currently up to par, we would have to be at around, for the first half of this year, we'd have to be at around 750,000 denials to date, and we're only at 221. Yes, tourism is down, but what could this be related to? Like, and I think, and I brought this up even in our in-person webinar, in last November at your offices, and then again that historically the Trump administration's had less denials of entry than ever before. So but what's happening under this administration is more media about it. So people are getting denied entry and they're immediately going to the media. So there's a media story. And as soon as one person sees a media story about it, as soon as they get denied, they're going to the media. So now we have like this roller coaster of media stories about it. So it just, to the general person, makes it look like, oh my God, everyone's getting denied entry to the United States. It's just that before, people weren't going to the media because they weren't encouraged to, because they weren't seeing other people go to the media, right? They just weren't doing it. So yeah, why do we think maybe there's fewer denials? I think there's self-selection. In other words, there's less tourism. So people are going, okay, I have all of these problems. I'm not going to enter the United States. I've got an arrest, not going to risk it. I think also consulates, they're doing stricter vetting as well. So if there's an issue, if you're applying for a visa, that's coming up at the visa end as well. So yeah, I just think it's a good thing, good data to see, because people are just thinking it's so much harder now, which actually is not the case. Yeah. I had this. This is another
Trump video. Love it.
Yeah, there's another video. I won't play the whole thing, but I'll play part of it just because we're running out of time. This was a client of mine who's on a green card sent me this, and she said, "Oh my God, you have to post about this immediately because green card holders absolutely cannot even travel anymore." So I'll play a little bit. Oh, shit. Here we go. How do we do that?
News. Trump moves to ban green card holders from re-entering the U.S. Under the proposed policy, every international trip could carry legal risks. Green card holders, even those who have lived in the U.S. for decades, would be required to submit full travel plans, undergo background checks, and secure government approval before leaving.
Okay. So I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's all stuff.
It's obvious misinformation.
True. Okay. So what are they attaching to even make this post? They are attaching to bits of truth, but then completely misconstruing it and making it into this scary post, right? So what green card holders need to fill out a form? Okay, if you're applying, in the process of applying for a green card, yes, there'll be a period where you cannot travel internationally and you have to apply for a travel document. So you have to fill out a form to travel. This is true, but it's not every green card holder. Same, if you have a green card and you're going to be outside of the United States for more than 6 months at a time, and certainly if it's going to be more than a year at a time, you may want to fill out a form, as they've said, that's called a re-entry permit to protect your green card, to make sure that the government doesn't think that you might be intending to abandon your green card. Because if you spend significant amounts of time outside the United States, the government could say, we think you're abandoning your green card. Also, significant amounts of time outside the United States can affect your ability to apply for citizenship. Because we're low on time, we're not going to go into that in detail. We have covered that before, and we can cover that again in the future. But I think what's important is that if you are traveling for significant amounts time outside the United States, or if you plan to, because we do have some green card holders that have been asking, like, what if I want to go, I just want to leave for a little bit because this is just, everything's making me feel uneasy. I want to go home for a couple of years.
Your
So
family.
if that's you, but you don't want to give up your green card, then talk to your immigration lawyer, because there is this re-entry permit that can preserve your green card for up to 2. You can leave the US for up to 2 years at a time, preserving your green card. The other thing is, if you don't fill out that form, people are like, oh, I didn't fill out that form, I'm not going to be able to get back in. That's not true, right? And if they've been out for a year, that's not true. Like, just talk to an immigration lawyer. They can guide you on how to re-enter the United States. Also, if an immigration officer at the airport says, you've been out too long, sign this form and give up your green card. You never sign that form. It's called an I-407. If you do not want to give up your green card, you never sign that form, because signing that form is irreversible. You've given up your green card. You can't go, again, ignorance is no defense to the law. My favorite saying for today's session. You can't then go, oh my God, I didn't know. I didn't have to sign that form. The immigration officer said I had to, and so I did, right? So
You thought that was the
they
case.
cannot make you give up your green card. They cannot make you, just if I can repeat anything, they cannot make you, the immigration officer, when you're entering with your green card, cannot make you give up your green card upon entry. In fact, they have to let you in with your green card. They can say, we're going to issue you to go see an immigration judge now, but you can deal with that on the back end. So they cannot make you give up your green card at the border when you re-enter with your green card. Really important to know.
Well,
And then we covered this last time. One of the times that it could be risky is if you're married, you get your 2-year green card based on marriage to a US citizen. Make sure you file to remove the conditions and get your 10-year green card timely. Because if you don't file that timely, that can be problematic.
I know one of the questions we got during our registration was, is there a very clear, yes, I can travel, no, I can travel on the green card? Like,
right. So when should you not travel? So again, it's kind of the same principle as if you're traveling on a visa, or anyone traveling into the United States. The same things apply again. Until you're a US citizen, if you commit a crime after getting your green card, that's a crime that can make you inadmissible, then sure, when you come back in on that green card, they can then say, you are inadmissible to the United States. Have you ever, especially controlled substance usage, if you have any conviction for a controlled substance, that can be problematic. Have you engaged in, prostitution? All of these things that can make you inadmissible can be problematic for you when you're traveling on a green card. So just if you have any of these issues and you've got a green card and you're traveling, always talk to an immigration lawyer and just say, hey, these are the things that have gone on and happened. Am I good to travel or not? Just double check. But if none of this has happened to you and you have a green card and you're not any of these things that you're seeing here, you're pretty fine to travel on a green card. It's safe. We've had so many clients travel on their green cards without any issues whatsoever. In fact, we have a client that traveled in Friday, oh my God, and I was, concerned for him because he did have a controlled substance issue from his past that had never been disclosed, that he was like, oh my God, what if this comes up now? And so he was concerned. He came in on his green. So, we said, okay, this is how you deal with that situation if it comes up. He came in and there was 0 questions asked. They were like, oh, you know what, you should apply for global entry. Welcome back. So even someone that was a bit afraid was fine, right? So just it's not like every single person is being denied entry on their green card, on their visas. As long as you're pretty clean, you're pretty good.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's the one thing is like,
oh yeah, so this is just, I've said that, just tell your immigration lawyer, again, not one solution fits all. So don't go, oh yeah, I had a drug problem and then, that guy got in, no problems, so now I'll just travel. Just always double check with your immigration lawyer.
It's always best to check. I think the other thing that has come up quite a lot is, as you're traveling, there have been a couple of travel bans that came into effect. Can you touch on that as well?
Yep, I'm going to speed through this because I don't think it's going to apply to too many of our viewers, except for maybe viewers that are either dual nationals. I think some of our viewers might be Iranian. And if you're Iranian and you're here on a visa or green card, then you'll qualify for one of the exceptions. So the travel ban won't apply to you. So anyone here on a visa actually, or green card, the travel ban doesn't apply to them. But this is so for tourists coming in from these countries that don't have dual nationality with a country that isn't affected. If you have dual nationality with another country that's not affected, even coming in as a visitor is fine. So again, who is, if you've got a green visa or green, if you're on one of the travel banned countries, you're a national of one of those travel banned countries, but you've got a visa or green card, you're fine. If you've got a diplomatic visa, you're okay. That's an exception. If you're coming in, if you're an athlete from one of those countries coming in for a World Cup or the Olympics, you're exempt. And if you are the relative of a citizen that's applying for your permanent residency for you, you're exempt. And then there's also a discretionary waiver. So if you are on that list and you think you can't come in, there are ways to apply for a waiver to be able to come in.
And there's definitely exceptions too.
Hmm.
So is there anything else you wanted to touch on around that travel ban, or I guess what we've kind of discussed previously with the processes of going through, visas and whatnot?
Yep. I think I wanted to just bring up, and I brought this up last time. Last time I said that, with any visas, and especially people that are, I know there's a lot of E3 visa holders watching. And I think what's really important right now is I brought up on June 2nd, that now there's this new rule that you have to submit your DS-160 at least 2 business days before your appointment, and they will not let you attend your appointment if you haven't done that. What we're noticing is it's kind of almost really 3 business days, because we had a client that submitted theirs on a Thursday, their appointment in the morning, their appointment was on the Monday, and they said that was not 2 business days before. Whereas Thursday, Friday, Monday. So what they really want is that it should have been Wednesday. So it was submitted on Wednesday. So they had all of Thursday, all of Friday as clear days, between the appointment and the submission, right? So just don't leave it. And also because the site is just so finicky.
It's a government site, it's not the greatest website out there. Everyone's also probably dealt with a university website at some stage. We're not submitting assignments at the 9th hour kind of thing. So give it a bit more time, really, is the rule.
Exactly. So very just important. We help our clients with their DS-160. So generally, we make sure that they've submitted it on time. This was someone who had done it themselves, different situation, but just be conscious of that, especially if you're approaching this without an attorney. Just make sure that you are conscious of that, because you will end up going to your interview. Then they say you can't come into your interview, and then you have to rebook another interview, and you stay in that country for an additional week or 2 weeks. So
which becomes expensive. I know we did have a lot of E3 questions come through, and we're getting a couple through even now. Generally speaking, no major changes, right?
No major changes. Just, that DS-160 thing is an issue, I think, for people on E3s. And then I just wanted to bring up, otherwise it's the same. It's pretty much the same. There's no prevailing wage, issues that we expect might come up. Again, recap of last week, no big things that are rocking the boat for E3s. I do think that anyone who needs an appointment in July or August now, because of the Fs,
the students
so there might be limited availability. So which will open back up again in September and all of that. But just if you just be mindful of that is what I would say.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I know this kind of gives us to the very end. I love everyone to pop through any questions in the chat. And if we don't have time to go through, because we did have quite a lot of questions when we're doing the registration that were double up. So hopefully we can get through a couple of those big ones. Number one, E3's visas being rejected for any political reasons. Australia, America, are we still good?
We're still good. The ties between America and Australia are strong. And there's no yes, politically, the F1s are being targeted because students are a little bit more vociferous than other visa categories. But the E3 is good. No attacks on the E3 for political reasons. And I don't foresee that happening either.
That's reassuring, at least. We have some people that have said they're on the E3 and they've had a visa denied in the past. I'm going to assume that it's, they got the visa denied, then they were approved for their visa, the E3. And is it risky for them to travel overseas for a vacation? Will the immigration officer see oh, you got denied previously, but you have a valid one?
Typically, someone who's been denied a visa before and then subsequently approved, usually in the process of getting approved for that visa, they have vetted the reason why you were denied before. So even if you had a waiver, you needed a waiver to get that E3 approved, you should be fine for the duration of that visa to travel internationally without issue. Again, if you have anything fresh that happens during that visa validity, then that could be problematic. But a previous visa denial should not affect a subsequent visa that's been approved and during the validity of that visa. Now, if you come to the end of that visa and when you got that visa, you needed a waiver, you will need a waiver again when you apply for your new visa. So this person that's, Mr. Kitchen, when he applies for his visa and he gets his waiver approved and he comes to the United States, he can come for the validity, he can come and go for as much as he likes while that visa is valid. When that visa comes to its end and he needs to apply for a new one, he will have to go through the waiver process all over again. So that new visa is going to take him another 8 months to get. So he might want to anticipate that and apply for it 8 months early. So that's a good tidbit to know.
That is an important thing. While I also have some people and some friends of mine have even been asking, they've got an E3 now currently, and they're wanting to make their stay permanent. They want to get that green card. It's a great country. Why not? Can you apply for the green card lottery or an employment-based green card while on an E3? And then is that a good time to do it now?
Yes, so you are not prohibited from applying for the green card lottery or applying for a green card on the E3. A lot of people think the E3 is a non-immigrant visa. I'm not allowed to pursue a green card while I'm on it. That's not entirely true. There are ways to pursue an employment-based green card and apply for the green card lottery while you're on the E3, just that you want to make sure that if you are doing that you are being supported and guided by an immigration attorney that knows how to do that, because there will be periods of time where you need to potentially, and most importantly now, because the journey from an E3 to a green card is backlogged. So it's taking about 4 years right now. So there'll be, you'll need to do an E3 renewal, and that's where it can get a bit tricky in the process. So you just want the timing of that journey is really important. But it doesn't mean you can't do it. You absolutely can do it, just as long as you are really careful about the timing.
Yeah. And like where that doesn't really matter too much. I know, there's talked about previously that couldn't do it in Canada or Mexico because they were neighboring states. Can you do visa interviews inside the US, or is it still anywhere goes?
So you can renew a visa status inside the United States, but you can't get a new visa sticker from within the United States. So if you want to travel internationally, you need to get that visa sticker put in your passport, which needs to happen at a US consulate outside the United States. And yeah, that can be done almost anywhere. You're not obliged to travel back. If you're Australian, you're not obliged to travel back to Australia. If you're not Australian, you're from another country, you're not obliged to travel back to your home country. There are a lot of consulates that will accept third country nationals, is what it's called, when you're not a national of that country that you're going to do the visa appointment at. It just depends on appointment availability. So for an example, Mexico had a lot of appointments. Actually, a great example, and I used this last time too, is Paris, because, we've had a lot of clients that are like, oh, I want to do it in Paris again because I did my E3 in Paris last time. It was great. But right now it's an absolute nightmare to try and get an appointment in Paris. So I wouldn't recommend Paris now. But 2 years ago, I said, absolutely, go to Paris is an awesome consulate to do it at, right? So it's always changing. So I think the other tale is just don't assume that because you did it somewhere last time, that it's going to be the same this time. Because the consulates rotate, and they rotate their staff too.
Yes, yeah. And I think one of the things that I found beneficial, especially when we went through our process, was I couldn't see all the consulate, timing. So I didn't actually know what country was the best one to go to for a renewal. Is there any kind of like hints or tips, or do we just have to talk to an immigration lawyer?
You don't have to, but I think if you do use an immigration attorney, you've got the benefit of knowing the climate at the consulates at any given time, right? Because that attorney will be processing visas at multiple consulates around the world to know, right? Like, so I know that Paris is not great right now because we've been trying to book people there and it's like a nightmare, right? Unless
Yeah.
you have dual nationality with Paris, Brussels, or Denmark, right? So, you know, again, not one solution fits all. So if you're
Yeah.
a French and Australian national and you want to apply for an E3 there, sure, it will be great. We can book you there. But, you know, if I didn't have the experience of trying to book people there right now, I wouldn't know. So the nice thing about speaking to an immigration lawyer that is that they probably know what's going on at the consulates, and especially if you have a particular consulate in mind. You know, we have a lot of clients that say, oh, I'm going to be in Italy over the summer, can I do it in Italy? Oh, I'm going to be here at Christmas time, I'm going to Peru, can I do it in Peru? You know, so an immigration officer, lawyer will kind of have a little bit more insight into, is it a good idea or not?
Yeah. Do you reckon we have one more question? I know there's a couple still coming through, but we might have to save those for a catch up later, I think. But I do have a couple around like green cards and particularly, you know, the travel on them. So number one was around can you travel while your application is pending when you have a green card? Number two was, is there any scrutiny when re-entering the US after like a month abroad? So similar kind of questions.
So re-entering after a month abroad, like we said earlier, no problem whatsoever. As long as you haven't like done one that you didn't get arrested, you didn't get a DUI, you didn't get any of these issues while you're abroad, you know, re-entering the US after a month is nothing. That's fine. You're fine. And we've had lots of clients that have been gone for a month recently, even for work or other reasons, that have had no issues in re-entering. They might ask you, how long have you been gone? Why were you gone for that amount of time? Oh, I had this, or I was visiting a relative, or this, you know, no problem. Welcome back. Welcome home. The other one was, I think, if someone has a citizenship interview.
Yeah, it's pending. When the application is pending, can you travel?
Yeah. So if your green card application is pending and you don't have a travel document yet, then often, unless you have an H-1B or an L, you can't travel until you have that travel document. And then again, if you have a green card and you've submitted a citizenship application, that was someone's question, I think, that's no problem. You can travel still on your green card while your citizenship application is pending, as long as you don't take any trips that last more than 6 months outside of the US during that period. Or there's another requirement for citizenship, which is physical presence. If you spent a lot of time outside of the US in the last 3 or 5 years, depending on how you're qualifying for your citizenship, and that trip might push you over the limit of number of days that you have to have been in the US, then that might be problematic. But generally, you have so talk to an immigration lawyer, but generally if you're applying for citizenship and you've predominantly been more in the US than outside of the US, and your trip's going to be less than 6 months, you should be fine to travel.
Done. Perfect. Well,
one thing. So the time you can't travel is once you've done your citizenship interview and you've gone to your oath ceremony and you've become a citizen now, you've got your citizenship certificate, you cannot travel internationally at that point until you have your US passport.
Yes, don't leave the country without a passport. That is a very big thing. Well, I think that's kind of all we got time for today. I know we've actually got quite a number of questions coming through. What is the best place that people can reach out to you and find out more?
Yeah, I think I had that. Where do I can share screen again. Here we go.
It's great. It's a great Instagram page to follow as well as LinkedIn. I already know that.
I know we need to be, we're going to get more active with our socials.
Messaging
we try and put the important stuff on there for sure, and some fun stuff too. So these are the info at CommisMarkel.com. I think there's an M missing. Oh, it's gone down below there. But there is a com. The phone number and LinkedIn, we try and put on the LinkedIn updates as well. So yeah, and our Instagram is just Camissa Markel.
At Camissa Markel. Yeah, same as the domain, just drop the .com. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know we're going to have another webinar like this in probably a couple of weeks. We'll get back to everyone. I'm sure we'll send out an email once that next one is confirmed. But thank you again for joining us. And thank you so much, Chantel.
Yeah, you're welcome, Nate. And again, anyone who wants we said at the beginning while people were still joining, if there's any specific topics people would like covered in depth, we're thinking of doing a series where we dive into topics more in depth for certain people as well.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much and enjoy your night, everyone, or morning, wherever you're tuning in from.
In this heat. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Karen.
Thank you for joining.